Welcome. We are overjoyed today to be joined by a great panel of folks. Danielle is Senior Director of Solutions at Fundraise Up. Greg Fox is Moore's very own Chief Strategy Officer. Jason is Principal of Creator Fundraising Strategy at Tiltify Catalyst. Jordan is Principal Group Program Manager with Microsoft Elevate. And Kayla Twain is Moore's Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy. And so we will be going through overall results today, channel results. We'll go through those briefly so we can spend a lot of time on what smarter organizations are doing. Then we'll have time for discussion at the end. And at this point, I'll kick it over to Greg Fox. Greg, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. By most standards, 2025 was a very successful year for most nonprofits in both performance and better understanding donor behavior and engagement. We all know that the dynamics of giving is changing and fewer households are giving today than they ever have, putting greater pressure on us to do our jobs better. So that said, let's look at some key findings from our analysis of individual giving last year and see how we did, and more importantly, how we are doing now. So overall, you can see that last year, individual giving through direct response channels increased about 6% compared to the previous year. Direct mail increased about 5%, digital up 9%. The trend toward fewer contributions continued last year as the overall volume of gifts declined, albeit slightly, only about 1% less than it did the previous year. There were 3% fewer gifts coming from direct mail, and giving online increased about 8%. Not surprisingly, the average individual gift in direct response continued to grow, up about 7%, including 8% in direct mail and about 2% online. And note, through May of this year, we see that direct mail revenue is down about 4% year over year, with about 12% fewer contributions. And again, we'll continue to monitor that throughout 2026. Earlier this week, Giving USA released its charitable giving report, and giving by individuals and their report was up about 4%, which is slightly less than our results from direct response programs. There's a lot of potential reasons for the variance, including the makeup of different type of organizations in the sample, but overall, we feel that it's reassuring that our numbers are relatively close to theirs, and especially we're focused on the direct response area. Retention. Despite being a primary focus of most organizations for several years now, retention of active donors continues to be a challenge. Since 2021, overall retention of active donors across both online and offline channels has continued to gradually decline, dropping to less than 44% in 2025, which is 4% below where it was in the previous year. It's also concerning to see that our multi-year active donors, they are retaining at an even lower rate than ever before, dropping to about less than 60% in 2025, and which is about 11% lower than it was in 2021. And less than 1 in every 4 new donors acquired in 2024 gave again in 25, which was 9% lower than 2021, putting greater emphasis and focus on new donor retention. Before we look at specific channel results, it's important to note that direct mail is still the predominant channel of response for most donors. But the mix between offline and online is changing slightly over time, dropping from a high of 76% in 2024 to about 73% last year coming from direct mail. We're seeing that prospects under the age of 60 who get an acquisition mail piece are increasingly going online to donate rather than mailing back the reply device. This creates a challenge for many organizations as they are under-attributing direct mail revenue and thus failing to fully evaluate the impact of DM campaigns and the role it plays in influencing younger donor behavior. So now let's take a few minutes and drill down further into some of the specific channel results, starting with direct mail. So as illustrated here, the overall response to direct mail fundraising campaigns in 2025 declined about 4% compared with the previous year. Helping to offset that decline in response was a 5% increase in average gift, which resulted in about 1 cent more per every name that was mailed in 2025. Response to direct mail renewal campaigns was consistent year over year, but the average gift increased 4%, leading to about 7 cents more revenue per name mailed than they received in 2024. Acquisition and the deeply lapsed reactivation response rates dropped yet again in 2025, down more than 7% year over year to 0.56%. Yet the overall revenue per name remained flat year over year, which is a trend that we have seen for several years now due to a nearly 9% higher average gift. Speaking of acquisitions, last year organizations mailed 3 times more new donor acquisition names than they did reactivating their own deeply lapsed names. So as you can see here, the response rate to lapsed reactivation mailings was nearly 20% higher than new donor acquisitions and produced a 5% more gross revenue for every name mailed and even more net. Finding a new donor can cost 5 to 10 times more than retaining an existing one. Reactivated donors also convert at a much higher rate and have a much greater long-term retention value than brand new acquisitions. Yet, we're finding that most organizations continue to undermail their lapsed donors. Nonprofits must begin to prioritize their lapsed donor efforts to take greater advantage of all the enhanced targeting and analytic tools to maximize the potential of their lapsed donor efforts. In our report, we actually have a lot of detail on segment by segment performances. And here you can see that 6 of 10 segments that are included in the report actually grew year over year. So because of time, we can't get into too much detail. So I urge you to go and look at the More report to see how your sector compared year over year. And you'll see that there's a wide range of variances between each of these sectors.
Thanks, Greg. So I want to take a moment to kind of zoom back out and look at donation activity across Fundraise Up, which gives us a view across thousands of nonprofits and even more transactions. So top line summary, digital had a strong year. Revenue was up 9%, gifts are up 7.2%. But really, we have to focus on mobile because that's a little bit of the story within the story here. So we see revenue for that is up 17%, gifts are up 14%. And the big headline here is that mobile crossed a significant threshold. Really, for the first time, the number of gifts on mobile outpaced desktop, which is pretty significant. But the one thing you really want to pay attention to is as we look at the average gift, the mobile gifts are actually lower than desktop. And that's likely because in that kind of giving experience, people give faster, but they give smaller when they're on their phones. Now, that's not a reason to deprioritize mobile, but really just thinking carefully about the experience that you're giving. And I want to drill down into that on the next slide. On this slide, on the last slide, we were looking at volume of gifts. This slide, I really want to focus on how the average gift here in the story that it's telling. So as you can see here on desktop, they're giving nearly twice as much on average and convert at a meaningfully higher rate. So really, if you have a portion of your email list on desktop, and likely older donors will skew that way, it means you're not only optimizing for mobile, you also have to consider desktop, especially with major donor prospects as well. And at the same time, the mobile volume is now larger on desktop. So if your donation form isn't genuinely excellent on mobile, so think Apple Pay enablement, thinking what are the ask amounts on the right screen, you're probably converting less than 25% of your mobile visitors. And so that small improvement in that conversion rate is really what's going to drive significant volume based on where that mobile traffic is going. These numbers are going up, but let's look at what's going down on the next slide. So we can see here that the time to donate has dropped 4.8% overall, primarily again due to mobile. And that 7% reduction in time to complete the donation paired with the 4.8% increase in the percentage of visitors who are actually giving, this kind of streamlined giving experience is really paying off. Donors who are encountering less friction because they're completing their gift faster ultimately results in more conversions. And really, we're looking at 20.6.7% of website visitors donating in 2025. That's a new high for the sector. And so the real focus here is making it easier for people to give. And when you do that, they're deciding to actually take you up on it and act on that. So let's look at the next slide around other things that are influencing that. So here we see the giving experience becomes easier when we offer things like Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal. Fewer than 2/3 of online donations are now made on credit card, which can sound a bit shocking. Apple Pay and PayPal together account for about 33% of gifts. And if those options aren't enabled on your donation form, you're potentially missing 1 in 3 donations, not because people don't align with your mission, but because that option isn't available. Now, we still have to consider that average gift. So for credit cards, it's $239 compared to the $164 for Apple Pay. And that's partly explained by the convenience of mobile wallets and partly by the demographics skewing a little bit younger for those who use them. Either way, it points to the value of modeling your ask amounts by payment type rather than presenting just kind of the same options to everyone.
This is the results for Moore's clients in particular. Just to keep the results apples to apples, it is the same clients for which we did digital year over year, so you can really see the growth and contraction. As you can see, every paid channel grew in both revenue and return on ad spend, or ROAS, in 2025, which is really incredible. The spend and revenue on social platforms had the highest increase year over year, and notably, it drove a 90% increase in ROAS, even when we spent 2.5x. There was a relatively small increase in search spend, but interestingly, that was the driver of the largest share of the revenue increase. So with search in particular, this channel benefits from the increases in efficiencies and performance across your other channels. And that increase in spend is a clear nod to the increased search traffic that was driven by the multi-channel campaigns. As we've gotten increased budgets across clients within the existing channels, we tend to expand into targeting more prospect audiences, and that's to help build the client files and bring in the new donors. What you typically see with that expansion, though, so when you're expanding into prospect audiences, you'll typically see your return on ad spend go down. But we were able to optimize campaigns and find audiences with high performance that drove that increased ROAS at scale. We saw increases in costs to place search and programmatic this year, but there was actually a reduction in CPMs for social. So that led to optimizations and budget shifts throughout the year to ensure we were funding the right channels in the most effective way for our clients. I think the big takeaway here, the big lesson, is that there's still plenty of room to scale. So for example, even as revenue more than doubled from paid social campaigns, the return on ad spend also almost doubled. A lot of the efficiency gains were also due to the growth of the modeled audiences we're using in paid media. That allows us to reach those more targeted individuals more efficiently. DRTV is also growing. Investment in DRTV is growing steadily year over year, which is due to a reflection of its performance. For more clients, media spend increased 11%, but the donor count for DRTV grew 14.2% year over year. The initial monthly gift revenue, which I'll talk about why we highlight that here, jumped 16.3% year over year. We count the initial monthly gift revenue for DRTV specifically to showcase that this really is a jump in newly acquired sustainers, and that revenue has not been annualized, nor does it include revenue from sustainers acquired in previous years. The monthly average gift here was $26.92, and the program has a $19 ask. The average cost to acquire a sustainer for more clients is $249. This is well below the target of $500 that you see generally for sustainer acquisition. Just for reference, a $500 cost to acquire pays back in 24 months, but for more clients, the average is 10 months to break even. 61% of our DRTV acquired monthly sustainers made it to month 13, which is well above the sustainer industry benchmark of 44%. So 61% versus 44%. The industry benchmark, though, it is worth noting, includes other forms of sustainer ACK, including canvassing, which has a much lower retention rate historically.
So we're going to jump in real fast, specifically around peer-to-peer. I know realistically, like, the idea is that obviously the world is shifting, but realistically having those revenue numbers and the unique donors going up is specifically because people are finding new ways to get engaged with who and what you are, whatever that mission may be. Obviously, those lower numbers at the bottom, that inherently would make you think that's bad, but that means people are returning on a regular basis. It means you're giving them opportunities to give in new, unique ways. That's not just from a donor perspective, but specifically as younger generations don't always have the monetary availability to support you or support specific missions, they do have ways to galvanize their friends through communities. So if we jump into the next slide, specifically talking on how those communities are engaged. So it's easy to want to chase the big dogs because you think realistically they're going to, most bang for your buck. But the reality is the subscriber totals don't tell you engagement numbers. Engagement numbers are king in the situation. More often than not, your mid-tier creator or community, even erasing the word creator, is going to help you better understand how to activate these groups. It's somebody, interest-based communities that show up and show out across the internet, depending on what they care about. It could be any type of hobbyist or situation they want to get themselves involved from a run club to video games to people crocheting. There is something for people to do across the internet, especially considering content creation can range from somebody who is 13 to 67. And the opportunity in general for these smaller communities is that these people are inherently invested in the people, places, and things that they show up for day in and day out. So jumping in to further that conversation on the next slide, obviously those numbers at the end, Gen Z, like this is the place, especially for millennials, like this is where they care. Because more often than not, they don't always want to hear directly from the nonprofit. Enterprise campaigns are great, but the reality is they want to hear from the people that they deem their peers, someone that they inherently are following across those social platforms or locations, community pages, meetup groups, whatever it may have you. The reality is like they want to donate to someone or donate through someone because they become the catalyst or the galvanizing party to make them believe in why this nonprofit, why this mission matters. So as we get deeper into this world, especially with this peer-to-peer strategy and how content creators and communities show up for these different nonprofits, it's inherently scary because you don't always have full control over what happens. But the reality is the opportunity and the desire to give is there.
So while technically not a channel, mid-level giving, mid-level stewardship is becoming, if it's not already, a priority for nonprofit organizations. We find that it's often broken out into different budgets and have separate fundraising teams. So for the first time, we wanted to provide separate in this year's report. Overall, 2025 was a strong year for mid-level donor programs. You can see that overall revenue went up about 10%, 7% more donors. Average gifts were about the same as they were year over year. The number of gifts per donors increased about 5%. Retention dropped ever so slightly. And you can see that the median average gift is about $511. And each donor, each mid-level donor was given about 4 gifts per organization. As with the digital results, some of this may be a result of increase in investment of time or greater attention by the organization. That said, organizations that have done well with this audience often fall between the personal touch afforded major donors and the mass market efficiency that we are commonly deploy against small dollar organizations. Those that are having the greatest amount of success are incorporating mid-level touches into their existing donor journeys. And in doing so, they do so rather than put them in their own mailing track. So we've just spent a bit of time talking about the numbers, what happened. Now let's sort of convert our thinking to what some of the quote, smartest organizations. What did they do this past year? And what were some of the greatest successes that we uncovered through what they were doing? So let's first look at cost. We all know that costs continue to rise, most notably postal cost, which will again increase in the coming days. There was one organization in particular in a benchmark that worked with Production Solutions to optimize their current package and to do so to increase savings without impacting results. They wanted to include elements like QR codes to enhance donor interaction. They wanted to engage through informed delivery. Through this process of working with Production Solutions, they saved more than $250,000 on their most important fundraising mailing. And they did so while also enhancing the overall multi-channel experience they were having with their donors. And they did so with little to no impact on giving. Overall, Production Solutions worked with these organizations to really find a way to help save them over $2 million in postal savings last year. And again, this will become increasingly important as we face the continued rise of postage.
So I want to take a moment to look at Feed the Children because they're kind of a perfect example of what happens when your donor experience needs to be able to handle urgency. So Harper Grubbs, he joined as the organization's first VP of Digital Fundraising and Transformation in 2022, with essentially the mandate of rebuild from scratch. In that time, there was a lot of agency turnover and kind of left them with an inconsistent tech stack. There weren't a lot of internal champions, and there wasn't a concrete digital strategy that one person owned and the rest of the team kind of rallied around. Harper chose Fundraise Up for donations, chose HubSpot for email, and Tatango for text, and Blackbot as a CRM. These are best-in-breed tools that actually integrate than choosing an all-in-one system. The team was so confident in the direction, they actually pushed to go live before Giving Tuesday, like right before. They onboarded in just 6 weeks, and the results were immediate. 10% more donations in the week leading up to Giving Tuesday, 25% more donations on the day itself, and over 40% of the donors were now giving on mobile, which was a bit of a struggle before. This is well above the typical nonprofit benchmark, and it's because what we talked about before, we made it easy. Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal, Venmo. Donors were able to complete these gifts on the first visit through their phone rather than abandoning a little bit later, maybe coming back and never really completing the experience.
Speaking of acting quickly, this past year showed us the importance of rapid response. The government shutdown occurred in October 1st through November 12th to be specific. And with this shutdown, we actually saw that there was food banks seeing a major wave of support. So during that 43-day government shutdown, SNAP benefits were paused, which created record high food insecurity that exceeded its peak during the Great Recession. Dare to Care Food Bank partnered with More to activate emergency response fundraising campaigns. Within the first 72 hours, they were live in email, Lightbox, paid social, paid search, and programmatic, and that speed to market definitely paid off. This resulted in an 871% lift in email conversions and paid media revenue increase of 150% year over year. What's interesting here too is obviously you want to work to activate your most dedicated supporters, but this is also an acquisition moment and a time to explore prospecting. So including prospecting audiences and paid media turned this into a prime acquisition moment for the organization. I think the takeaway here is truly if your organization is responding to something newsworthy or that is affecting a large group of the population, this is the time to dip into prospecting efforts and expose your org to individuals who may not otherwise have engaged with you. Obviously, it's important to keep in mind their journey and treatment once they're on the file, as they did onboard during that specific moment in time. Definitely rapid response, being in market quickly paid off for this organization in dividends. Creating their own giving days. So I'm going to say something extremely not surprising to anyone here. Calendar Q4 is becoming more crowded than ever. So not only are we competing with all of the other nonprofits during year end, a fun surprise is we're now competing with the commercial space as well. Can't have anything nice. No, I'm just kidding. So we have pushes for campaigns like Travel Tuesday from the airlines and things that are sort of bookending our Giving Tuesday campaigns and just creating more noise than ever before. So many clients at Moore's encouragement are choosing to create an organization-specific giving day that falls outside of giving season, and that is to garner more revenue, sort of bolster that revenue in a time of year with far less competition and noise. We had 3 orgs that partnered with us to do that at Moore and experienced great success. One of the examples here is Children's Hospital Philadelphia launched their first ever I Heart CHOP Day of Giving. That was on March 28th, 2025. It was so successful that they actually expanded it into a peer-to-peer event, which was held this year in 2026. Alzheimer's Association's End ALZ Day raised $250,000 through digital response, which was more than 2 times last year's match. And Shriners Children's National Superhero Day increased their number of gifts year over year by 59%.
So continuing with creating your own giving day, I want to look at Maison. Maison is what happens when you combine a really mission-aligned campaign strategy with really robust data. So Maison runs their largest fundraising campaigns of the year around the high holy days. Their deputy director, Nicole, spent kind of years refining the core strategy, which is reaching the right donor with the right message at the right time. That's something I'm sure we all aspire to, but are often held back by data. But at Maison, donors who gave during the prior year's High Holy Days campaign, they received a tailored appeal for that current year that specifically acknowledged and kind of recognized the prior support that they had given. Then they use Fundraise Up's donation volume maps, which essentially show the donation activity and when it is highest during a specific day of the week or time of the day to determine an email send time. If donors are giving on Thursday evenings, then maybe the email goes out Thursday afternoon. If Tuesday mornings are quiet, then maybe they don't send an email Tuesday morning, that kind of thing. So with that structure, then they also layered in Dataro's AI-powered direct mail predictions on top of it. Dataro identifies which donors are the right fit for a mail piece because the right donors are being reached by mail. Those same donors then convert digitally when they encounter the online campaign. It's really an integrated loop and a really omni-channel donor experience that allows you to see higher conversion. And what they saw was a 45% online conversion rate. The industry average is 28%, so that's a 60% increase above benchmark. And that is what systemic personalization, data-driven timing, and really a mission-aligned moment and campaign strategy can create.
Another thing smart orgs did, many organizations increased their investment in existing channels, or they actually found new ways to expand their presence within those channels. So I'm going to talk about Native here for a while. Native showed significant year-over-year growth, which actually outperformed the broader programmatic portfolio. The Native campaign spend increased 60% year-over-year, while Native attributed revenue surged 115% year-over-year, and that significantly outpaced overall programmatic growth and really just reinforced Native's role as a high-return format. The expanded use of Native helped offset rising media costs by driving stronger engagement and higher conversion efficiency, also increased donation value, which contributed meaningfully to the overall lift in revenue and return on ad spend. So Native is a star. Okay, so now shifting over to paid social. In recent years, we've kind of seen slowing performance on paid social, primarily Meta. But we actually saw significant growth in 2025 with paid social as a revenue driver. Performance has not really recovered to the paid social ROAS levels of yesteryear, so that was prior to significant data and targeting changes from the late 2010s onward. But it was for the first year in some time able to drive positive returns year-round for many clients. Increases in return on ad spend were largely buoyed by the lower CPM that cost less to place year over year, unlike the other channels in paid media. So due to those reduced costs to place, clients were able to grow their direct revenue from paid social by 163% with only a 38% increase in spend. So we love that proportion. Talking a little bit about texting, this is also something you can't get me to shut up about, but many organizations started expanding their texting efforts to be always on year-round evergreen strategies. So I think a lot of orgs had sort of aligned their texting pushes with tent poles around fundraising moments, but really they're expanding into like Q1 and Q2 now, the first half of the year, and doing so has helped them result in 600% increases in revenue in Q1 and Q2 year over year. A lot of that is just due to them not sending in Q1 and Q2 year over year and doing it this year. So just to give an idea of the impact there. It's like IT, you turn it off and then you turn it on. And then shifting over to email, many clients are extending the lives of their year-end fundraising campaigns in email, which has bled into Q1 of the following year. So that's resulted in quite a large jump in Q1 email revenue year over year. What I mean by that is if you have a year-end challenge campaign or match campaign that ends on 12/31, many orgs have seen a lot of success even expanding the life of that campaign into the first year of January, which has really, really bolstered their January numbers year over year and gave that Q1 a big bump. Smart orgs also found new forms of investment in Simeo Cloud email acquisition. That proved to be a solid investment for many orgs. Simeo Cloud email acquisition is built on 136 million donor records and 2.2 billion transactions to locate prospects who are most likely to respond within the email channel. I have a few examples here of what we saw from sample orgs that partnered with us. One organization turned a profit in 5 days, which is pretty unheard of in the acquisition space. Another nonprofit broke even in 8 days, and a third organization generated $28,000 from 48,000 leads. So just from a strategy standpoint, which I thought was interesting, with this specific tool, organizations are finding that feeding those prospects into the existing comm stream and in tandem with temple campaigns is proving to be the most effective approach. So that kind of runs counter to historical approaches where you would maybe enter those people into a prospect warming series with no ask attached. And so we found that going straight for the ask actually has paid off in a big way here, but we attribute that largely to the selection process that we utilize. These prospects are ripe and ready to give. So let them give.
All right, awesome. On that note, we'll jump into a little bit of technology here. Honestly, in the years that I spent time working at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, managing the content creator programs over there, technology was the end-all be-all arms race. If you can make the process simple and easy for anyone to show up, show out for you, why would that not be the number one priority? If you want to take a look at a huge situation where all of those technologies came together in a single entity in time through Mr. Beast and Mark Rober through the Team Water campaign last August, which at one point was the highest fundraise total for an individual creator until a wonderful group of individuals in Poland beat that total earlier this year with over 60 million raised. It just consistently shows you, especially over the last couple of years between this experience, the one in Poland and another one we'll talk about later, that this constant rise of ways to make a community show up, put your band together, and figure out the best ways to support a nonprofit. They're coming in at a faster rate. But the most important piece is like, can you give a group of people the easiest way to fundraise for you? That includes any form of technology in the current sense of how you donate. This campaign alone through Team Water raised over $10 million just from cryptocurrency. Obviously, that's a very scary and new and unique experience because of how Web3 plays into your business, your nonprofit, or however you associate your time and space into this world. But the reality is, if people have money there and they want to give it, you should give them options to do so. Additionally, in terms of how, like, you see that number in the 600,000 concurrent views on the kickoff stream, the reason why that's so successful is because you're giving people ways to gamify the way that they're contributing to the opportunity. Obviously, controlled chaos is your best way to invoke and invite people to be a part of who and what you are. If you're giving a donor the opportunity to dictate what is going to happen from their contribution, whether that's a funny situation or it's something that's bringing more notoriety around storytelling because of your mission, that is the way that you're going to see success because you're constantly building in opportunities to maximize that.
Wow, that's huge. And those are some amazing numbers. And so I wanted to look at this specific example because I know there's some organizations out there just asking, how do I even get started with peer-to-peer? I've never done this before. And so I wanted to look at Bringing Home Hope. They provide financial and emotional support to families going through cancer treatment. So a lot of their fundraising is driven by signature events and community programs, those supporters who really deeply care and want to do more. But in this example, their old platform made it harder for those supporters to take action, especially at that moment where it was top of mind. In this example, the donation form wasn't even hosted on their own website, and it created a lot of confusion and friction during the giving experience. They decided to move to Fundraise Up, allowing supporters to build their own campaign pages with minimal setup. And then just the first quarter raised almost $85,000 through fundraisers alone. That's an 138% increase in community-led fundraising revenue and 260 hours, just time spent on admin tasks because the back end was previously difficult to manage. I loved what their school program manager said. They said that the peer-to-peer program was so easy that she kept feeling like she was missing something. And that's exactly what I love to hear. It's the best infrastructure is the kind that gets out of the way of your mission.
As I mentioned earlier, don't take mid-level folks out of your direct marketing efforts. Case in point, there are 3 organizations here that really capitalized on this in 2025. One, the International Rescue Committee. They've reframed their lapsed mid-level donors into a high value opportunity rather than a lost segment. They use more as donor ambassadors to deploy highly personalized, high-touch communications designed to reestablish connection, reinforce impact, and prompt renewed giving. They successfully reactivated 11% of their lapsed mid-level donors, showing the power of human-centered engagement at scale. CHOP, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, approached mid-level donor strategy as a growth engine, focusing on structured upgrade pathways that encourage donors to deepen their commitment to the organization over time. They use targeted mail, digital reinforcement, and effective modeling to generate more than $6 million in revenue, including $2.9 million from direct mail alone, and delivered over 1,000 new max-level gifts. If you want to know more about how they found these mid-level prospects, they'll be joining us for a webinar on the 16th. Shriners Children. They built a highly intentional mid-level pipeline through its Hope and Healing Society, asking donors to elevate their giving within a defined 6-month window. This structured approach, supported by coordinated outreach and a strong identity for the mid-level community, resulted in 820 donors upgrading their level of support. The successes of these programs highlight how aligning donor experiences with a sense of belonging and impact can drive rapid and meaningful movement within mid-level pipelines.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Christophides, and I'm with Microsoft. And I know we've been talking a fair amount about what the technology can enable. And I just want to say thank you for including me here just to share with you some of the work that we've been doing in the background, creating some of the technologies that Moore and the other partners that you've heard about thus far in the webinar are utilizing to make these results come to reality. I guess first off, you may or may not know, but our Microsoft mission is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. As I was doing a little bit of my preparation for this, I found that today is the actual anniversary that this mission statement was struck by Microsoft, June 25th. And I thought it could not be more appropriate than to share it with you. If I could get the next slide, that moves us on to Elevate and the team that I am part of. Within Microsoft, we've historically had a group that was focused on not-for-profits, philanthropies, IGOs, etc. And we've really formalized that organization into Elevate, where we're now focused on not only those organizations that I spoke about, but in addition, education and workforce enablement. We know that AI is the opportunity and the concern of today. And Microsoft, the role that we play in terms of providers of technology, thought leaders in the areas of privacy and security, we have a role to impact this. And so specifically, Elevate was formed with these tenets in mind. So specifically focused on influencing public policy, obviously driving skills in an AI economy where it will affect everything that we do, potentially for the positive, but we need to make sure that we really understand how to use it and where to restrict it. Obviously, partnerships with folks like Moore. We have grants that we do on a public basis, and then the foundation of it all is tech and innovation. Most recently, before this role, I was actually in our engineering team helping create many of the tools that help bring these solutions to life. And so it's really great to be here to be able to represent them. If I could get the next slide, please. So from an Elevate perspective, as I mentioned, we're focused on education. I specifically have been working in the education space for over a decade, but also that overlaps into not-for-profit. And most specifically now, how does that help the workforce continue to evolve, bring AI into the workplace to help amplify the work that they're doing? My team in particular works very, very closely across organizations on a global basis. And so being able to see how different countries treat AI and how we are able to influence institutions and policymakers really drives forward the actions that we take. We think we've got a real responsibility to not only develop a secure platform, but also the governance that's required to make sure that we treat everyone equitably when they're using AI and also safely. And that really leads me to my last slide here, and that's our principles for responsible AI. You know, internally, when we develop a new product, we obviously go through the ideation process, it gets reviewed, etc. But before anything comes to life, there is a whole set of governance models that we must pass before any software is released publicly. And as it relates to AI, first and foremost, fairness. Any of the algorithms that are created that underpin the AI that's produced by Microsoft treats all people equitably. Secondly, you want to know that it's reliable and that it's safe. We're really always striving around robust systems that constantly fact check. The third piece is around privacy and security. Any personal data that is utilized in Copilot or any of our AI tools is always owned by the end user. It's never ever shared publicly. It's never sold. And there's very, very high restriction around who can use it, even when it is your personal interaction. So for example, in the United States, 13-year-olds and below will not have access to our AI tools. Why? Because we don't have the right governance in place where we feel confident saying to a parent, hey, your child shouldn't get access to that, and we're restricting it or not. And so 13 plus is our actual line. Not all companies actually are so restrictive around that, and it's something we believe that is the right thing to do. Around inclusiveness, we really think that it should empower diverse populations. And again, that comes right from the point of creation. If you saw the team that I came from, they're very, very representative of the populations that are around us on a global basis. And part of that goes into making a very inclusive product. Transparency. It shouldn't be mysterious, right? You want to know how decisions get made. If you look at the transcript of how any of the work that comes out of Copilot, very obvious what the sources are, where the information's coming from. And then lastly, responsibility. We really believe that we are accountable to you, we're accountable to the public. And so we're really upholding very, very high standards around AI development. And we're pushing the policymakers to make sure that we bring AI to the marketplace, not just Microsoft, but in general, in a very safe way. So with that, if you've got any questions about the products that we're producing or how products like Copilot or M365 could help you in your institution, please go online to Microsoft.com. There's tons of getting started information that's there. And again, thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about the principles under which we bring this technology to market.
And I completely agree. I think one of the things you said around opportunities and concerns really stood out to me because I think at Fundraise Up, we really take that to heart when we're thinking about our checkout flow and the opportunities at each one of those decision points that really influence generosity and influence if someone's going to give or not. For example, the ask amount is an opportunity. The moment after someone makes a one-time gift selection is an opportunity to introduce recurring giving. The option to cover fee costs, that's another opportunity. The payment method selection is an opportunity. Really, most organizations treat these as static design decisions that are made once but aren't ever really revisited. But the approach with AI treats them as dynamic, real-time decisions personalized to each donor. And that has a pretty compounding effect. We typically see a 10% lift in revenue just from ask amounts, a 5.8% lift in recurring conversion from smarter defaults, an 87% fee coverage rate. That means the platform's practically free, and a 3% reduction in churn from smarter card retries. Really, none of these numbers are transformative on their own, but when they all happen on every donation, every day at scale, you really see a significant impact on revenue.
So let's talk about a campaign, and then we'll talk about ways that anybody can get involved in a similar kind of opportunity. So last summer, content creator Ryan Trahan ran an event called 50 States in 50 Days, where the whole entire purpose was that he was going to go with his wife on a road trip. Over the next 50 days, they were going to go to every unique Airbnb they could visit by single state. They had specific objectives they had to complete in each individual day, and it was 50 unique videos across the YouTube platform. In that aspect, there were ways that people could get involved in terms of their donations. Whether you were a brand and you wanted to donate over $50,000 to make Ryan do a very unique thing with an object called the Wheel of Doom, it sounds exactly what you think it is. It was miserable for him, but great for the rest of us because it made incredible content. But in the middle of that, each individual video, he would have a segment at the end where he would talk about the donors that contributed over a specific amount in that previous day. There was like a 4-day gap between the videos and when he was recording them, and then when they actually would go live on his channel. One of the things that was very surprising from both the Tiltify side and when I was still at St. Jude was how many people jumped in from the $5,000 to $10,000 level. That was anybody from an individual with a DAF, just a family with the disposable income, to be involved with that, to brands, because the brand said, oh, wait a minute, if I have $5,000 and I donate it to Ryan, I'll get him to make my short ad read for $5,000 on, potentially having anywhere from 5 to 10 million people see this video. That sounds like a slam dunk for me. So over the course of the next 50 days, brands were donating, and anybody from an itch cream to an insurance agency to, real estate to, major brands like Seven Brew and Justin Boots and Hobby Lobby and so on and so forth were participating in this capacity so that they could have their little ad read on Ryan's content, as long as it was stemming back towards why we were all there in the first place, to do as much as we could for the mission of St. Now, that may sound great for anybody that has a huge audience, but the reality, there are good uses in terms of AI and how you can maximize your effort in terms of what you're going to do for nonprofit. Tiltify has a service called Beaker that when you sign up and you're going to build out your campaign, it'll literally give you options based on what you feed it. I actually tested this a couple months ago when I was still at St. Jude. I was purposely harassing and making fun of one of my coworkers, like, what dumb things could we get Ricky to do? And I gave it a list, and it started pumping out either rewards, polls, or other milestones that we could hit based on ways that we could, I guess, have fun poking fun at Ricky. But it was such a cool way to see, like, I don't have to be a major creator or a big time celebrity or something of that sort. I have a huge level of clout to be able to provide something unique and fun from a fundraising perspective. I just have to have creativity. As long as I have the opportunity to think it and imagine it, I could put it through this system utilizing the Tiltify platform to do as much as I can for the place that I care deeply about.
More is using AI tools and select processes specifically ones that connect directly into platform APIs to assess creative performance by looking across hundreds of ads at once, pulling insights that would be difficult to review manually or otherwise. So our AI Social Insights tool looks at the language that's used in copy descriptions and headlines on Meta, and it finds key verbs, nouns, and phrases across campaigns that lift performance. The tool also analyzes creative imagery so it can find common themes that lift or suppress performance. It uses color and tone analysis to inform creative decisions like button color and text overlays, for example. I'm sure some of you have heard of the ongoing changes to Meta's Andromeda algorithm. That's kind of timely right now. So with those changes, not only does the need for strong creative become even more important, but in fact, the system's going to require additional creative options to ensure the system can appropriately optimize more options than have ever historically been needed before to serve. So using AI to recommend creative frameworks based on what works best allows our team to get a jump start on digital collateral. The example on the slide here showcases that phrasing such as rush critical supplies and the devastating impact doubled ROAS for one organization. For another client, Moore found that text-based images had a 56.2% increase on click-through rate and has used that information to inform future planning for that client. Very exciting stuff.
And we've heard throughout this webinar, there are many tools available to us to maximize donor performance, optimize our fundraising efforts, regardless of what channel. The last tool that we want to cover today is Moore's Semio Audience Ensemble AI, which is an AI-directed system that looks through a lot of different models for acquisition and uses a wisdom of crowds approach. Sometimes you might only take the top decile of donors from a model, but you'd miss that person who is in that second or third decile from every model who would likely be a good prospect. Semio Audience Ensemble AI would find that prospect for you. We had 10 organizations in 2025 that used this for the first time at large scale. That is, they had more than 70,000 names, tested it across multiple packages, and tested across various time periods. 9 of the 10 organizations experienced double-digit increases in revenue per piece mailed. So AI is good at both creating the model and helping look across models to find the overall best audience, which is so critical today during a time when active donor universes continue to decline and investments in new donor acquisition is more vital than ever before.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We do have questions in the Q&A and in the chat. We'll run through those, shout out any questions that you have. And even if we get kicked off of Teams, we will follow up later with answers. To start with some of those questions, a question for Danielle. Cynthia asks if there's a difference in conversion on mobile between credit card and mobile payment gateways like Apple Pay.
Yes, we typically see for those that are on mobile, so like the Apple Pay or Google Pay experience, that they are converting much faster because you're just kind of clicking the button. However, when you're comparing that to credit cards, which will typically be more common on desktop, you still see a strong conversion rate, however, not compared to what you would experience on mobile. However, it has a higher average gift. And so you have to weigh the balance between both. And that's why I was saying you don't want to abandon your mobile strategy or abandon your desktop strategy. You kind of have to do both and think about the fullness of those donors.
Yeah. And I'm guessing consider if you lose out on, if you don't have Apple Pay accessibility, you may lose out on that donation entirely.
Absolutely. People always mean to come back, but they don't.
Yeah. Kayla, Stephanie asks, does the ROAS on digital channels include fees or only net media spend?
The ROAS that we cited today is net media spend, no fees.
Okay. And then Charlotte wants to know what data you have around ACH and EFTs.
So that's percent of sustaining giving that comes in there. It's about 18 to 20% typically of sustaining givers choose the automatic withdrawals, and the retention numbers associated with that is why orgs want that. So 95% of the EFT or ACH recurring donors will keep giving, and that's compared to like 62% via checks or 87% via credit or debit cards.
And that's probably in a mature program where you're actively trying to get those people over to that higher retaining channel. Jen would like to know, what are your thoughts on exploring the DRTV space? She's noticed that organizations with more mature programs tend to have an advantage. Their focus is on CTV, but the strength and reach of DRTV make it an area they'd like to test.
DRTV is a juggernaut. It's probably the most scalable sustainer acquisition channel. The donors it brings on typically are very high value and retain well. So there's roughly like, I think, a 70% first year retention for your DRTV, but that's compared to like 48% for something like face-to-face. DRTV also kind of, I think, has a hidden advantage as well, that it lifts other channel performance. So it lifts mail response, digital. It also has a very high brand awareness generation component, which is great. I think the main difference between like a CTV and a DRTV campaign is the length and duration of the campaign required, and also the investment. So CTV is a little bit of a, well, it's comparably a much lower investment than a DRTV program. But the good news there is that I think the fact that you guys have a strong CTV program is proof of concept to roll out with something bigger like this. And you have video assets that you're producing, obviously. And so, yeah, I think that the price points are going to be quite different, but definitely worth exploring and talking through. It's incomparable in terms of results for sustainer app.
And to the point that Moore has a white paper and a webinar called So You Think You Want to Do DRTV, given the costs involved there, so that people are making educated choices there. One of the things we talk about is a video advertising trifecta, where you're using DRTV for the reach, CTV for the targeting, and PSAs as kind of the stretching of it. They're the breadcrumbs that expand the meatloaf, because you can get additional ad impressions at little to no cost.
And Nick, the DRTV, I mean, that's transformative growth for orgs that invest in it. That's where you're going to get that big transformative growth.
Right. And Nick, there's a hidden benefit of DRTV as well as it relates to other channels. It is proven to be a very effective acquisition strategy for deeply lapsed direct mail and online donors. So it's something that most people don't really think about, but it is proven to be very effective there.
And then we have a question for everyone. Do you have comparisons between US and Canadian data? I can answer it. Go ahead, Danielle.
I was going to say we do on the Fundraise Up side. I think we can provide that in a follow-up. I don't have those on me directly.
I know we did not have it as a part of this report, in large part because our Simeo Cloud data system is centralized within the United States, although we do have some Canadian clients and can likely put together some information for you on that. Those were the questions that I had. Thank you, Danielle, on the digital side, Jordan on talking about responsible AI and what we owe to each other in that channel, and to my Moore colleagues for covering our side of things, and Jason for taking us through peer-to-peer, which I learn about every time I talk with Tiltify. So thank you all for participating, and thank you all for joining, and have a great day.